Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Juice is the New Tea. I am your host, Eleni, and joined with me today, a very special guest. We are going to chat with Lisa Marchiano, and she is going to help us explore the deeper language of our subconscious. I'm very excited about today's conversation. It hits personal and home for me. Lisa Marchiano is an award-winning author, podcaster, and certified Jungian analyst. I'm probably going to need you to show me how to pronounce that a little bit better.
That's okay.
Lisa is dedicated to unlocking the hidden meaning behind the images, symbols, and stories that show up in our sleep, our dreams. Through her work, Lisa empowers others to understand themselves on a more profound level, using our dreams as a powerful tool for insight, healing, and growth. Lisa is the author of Dreamwise, Unlocking the Meaning of Your Dreams, which I have right here. Beautiful. And she is the host of a popular depth psychology podcast, This Jungian Life, with over 10 million downloads, amazing, and a loyal following that includes artists, journalists, and celebrities. Her podcast is a top podcast in the US in the health and fitness category. So I'm so excited to dive into the world of dreams and what it is that they're trying to tell us. So without further ado, my guest, Lisa Marchiano.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. My first remote podcast recording also. So this is a first. So I personally have always been fascinated by the concept of dreams. And I was like, I need to reach out and find a dream interpretator and someone who has this experience. And I searched on Instagram, dream interpretator. And your podcast came up and I gave it a listen and I saw you in the book and I was like, this is the answer to my prayers. Like it was incredible. And then I think it was like 3 days later that I had a really intense dream that I spoke to you about on our first call.
Yes.
And it was just like one of those things where you put something out into the universe and it comes back to you. And okay, like I'm like, all right, we need to dive into this a little bit more. So I felt like it was just divine confirmation to have this conversation with you and share it with the Juice is the New Tea community. So I want to get right into our dreams and what it is that you do. So is this true? If we live to 80 years old, we spend 6 years of our lives dreaming?
That sounds about right. I don't have the numbers exactly in front of me, but that sounds about right.
I find that fascinating that that's not even just us like sleeping, that is purely us dreaming. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because, one of the questions around like why we sleep, because sleep has been like conserved through all of these many years of evolution, across species and everything. But if you think about it, it's sort of a terrible idea from a survival standpoint. You're going to go completely unconscious for 8 hours. You're not going to know what's happening around you. Like, that leaves you pretty vulnerable.
Yeah.
So sleep itself must do something really important for evolution to have conserved it. And dreaming is also a little bit like that because we know that, as far as we know, all mammals dream. We think that octopus and spiders dream. So dreaming appears to be incredibly widespread across many, many different organisms. And that tells us it must be really important.
Yeah. I had the pleasure, as I mentioned, of reading your book, Dreamwise, and we're going to get into that and some of the questions. And I just wanted you to dive a little bit deeper into the ideology of the book, but kind of want to get a little bit of a backstory about you and how you got into this work. So you're a certified, tell me if I'm
certified Jungian analyst.
Jungian analyst. So
Right.
can you tell us a little bit about what that means and how Carl Jung has impacted your work?
Sure. Well, so Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist. He was born in 1875. He died in 1961. He was a colleague and a contemporary of Freud. So they were both sort of there at the founding of psychoanalysis. For a little while, they collaborated very closely together. And then Jung kind of went off on his own way and founded his own school of depth psychology. And if you've heard the terms introvert and extrovert,
Yeah.
collective unconscious, shadow, synchronicity, archetypes, then you already know a little bit about Jung. So some of his ideas have kind of permeated the popular culture, and a lot of us may be more familiar with him, even if we've never heard of him. We may actually know something about his the system of psychology that he developed. And he was very interested in the role of the unconscious, as are all depth psychological schools. But Jung in particular felt that the unconscious could both be a place where there are things that are forgotten or repressed or just kind of never made it above the threshold of consciousness, but also that the unconscious could be generative, that there could be creative new insights, there could be new attitudes, there could be a wealth of symbols offered up by the unconscious, and that the unconscious is essentially, in some sense, kind of guiding our development. And part of the way it does that is through dreams. So dreams are like a letter that your unconscious self writes you every night, usually to tell you what you're doing wrong, sometimes give you some pointers, kind
Oh,
of
no
confront
shots fired
you.
over here. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. Occasionally to encourage you.
Okay. Just occasionally, though, not often. Just
No, not very often. So yeah, that's Jung's thinking about dreams, and I would say that most modern schools of dream interpretation are more based on Jung than Freud.
okay.
So Freud had this idea that the dream was like a disguised message, and you kind of had to crack the code, and that's why he wound up saying, like the pencil in the dream is really a penis, but your mind didn't want to. That would have woken you up, so it needed to
Right.
be disguised. Whereas Jung said, no, I think dreams are the very best possible way of communicating something that is complex. And also the unconscious doesn't have access to kind of linear thinking and directed language that we have. So it kind of gives it to you in symbolic form most of the time. So it's not that it's trying to confuse you. It's just trying to communicate something in sort of the language of imagery, metaphor, poetry.
Yeah.
And so we have to kind of sink in and see if we can understand the symbols. And so yeah, so most modern dream interpretation schools are more based on Jung's approach than Freud's.
Yeah. So, wanting to touch on really quick because you brought this up in terms of the symbolic thinking when it comes to our dreams. So, is it safe to say that if someone that we know in this lifetime presents themselves to us in our dreams, or like when we're in our apartment or a place that looks and feels like our apartment, how often is that actually that person being represented, or our space, the environment being represented? Or should we really look at everything as being purely symbolic to our subconscious?
I think it's usually good to start with the assumption that everything is about the inner world. So if you dream, if you have a dream that's set in your apartment, you could sort of say, well, what is that? That's kind of like my current state of mind, or the current way that I'm living. So it's not a particularly opaque symbol. It's kind of like, this is where I'm living. But to sort of take it like that, rather than like, if you have a dream that your ceiling's falling in your apartment, in other words, it's more like, I wonder what about the way I'm living needs some attention, versus, oh no, I bet you the ceiling's going to fall in next week.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if we have someone in our dreams who is sort of a daily part of our lives, like if we dream of our spouse, it could well be that the dream is referencing the outer world. Sometimes it's referencing both the inner and the outer world, because a lot of times they're kind of similar.
Yeah.
But it's helpful to realize that usually when we dream about our spouse, not always, but usually when we dream about our spouse, it's going to be showing us something about the dynamic in the relationship. It could be your spouse, your friend, your boss, someone who's in your life in a really ongoing daily way. The dream could definitely be referencing the relationship, but it might not be that it's actually about that person. It could just be something about the connection between the two of you, or what's going on between the two of you. But I'm never going to say never. Sometimes we do dream. Sometimes our dreams do offer almost kind of factual information
Mm-hmm.
about the other person that maybe we've been ignoring, we haven't wanted to know about. We gave an example in the book of a woman whose husband was making some poor decisions, and I think in the dream, he's driving, but he can't see properly, and they're about to have an accident.
Yeah,
And
I
that was
remember
some
that.
that was some information about something that was actually going on with her husband.
Hmm.
But it was of course, like, it was told in symbol, you
Right,
know. But yeah, it was kind of about the dynamic, because she was kind of allowing this to happen without being like, "Hey, what are you doing?"
right,
But also, kind of the dream was sort of signaling danger.
right. Yeah, I remember reading about that, and it was I think the conclusion, at least for me, even when I was reading the dreamer's dream, I'm like, okay, the husband's driving a vehicle, right? Like he's the one that's leading in a sense,
Hmm.
and she's not trusting where it is that he's going. Does that necessarily mean when they're driving that she can't trust him? No, it's more so like the metaphor of she needs to speak up, or she.
Yes,
So I thought that
exactly.
that was really interesting too, because I think there are sometimes, at least I know in conversations with my friends, people will take things literally.
Yeah.
And I think like that's the largest misconception when it comes to our dreams. Also, if we believe that everyone around us, and you already touched on this, is like an extension of self, like a mirror of a
Hmm.
part of us.
In the dream world, yes.
Exactly. Then I feel like how that person shows up in the dream is really
Hmm.
just signaling a part of yourself
Exactly.
that needs to be brought to the surface for you to be like, okay, why did so and so show up looking haggard and stressed and concerned? Like, what part of me am
Hmm.
I, do I need to look at a little bit more when it comes to that?
Hmm.
So, backtracking a little bit, when and how do we dream, right? The REM cycle is the fourth stage of our sleep.
Hmm.
So, during which the heart rate is elevated and our brain activity increases.
Hmm.
So, I read somewhere that scientists can't necessarily determine, right? Like, why do we dream? We don't really know why we
Yeah.
dream.
Yeah.
But there is evidence that helps, like, I know for me, dreams help me like process things that I'm
Hmm.
going through. And I'm very fortunate I have a strong relationship with my dream maker, which I
Oh,
love
that's
that you
nice.
referred
Yeah, yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah.
That part of your brain that produces the dreams
Hmm.
as your dream maker. I think it's so
Right.
cool to humanize that
Yeah.
part.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that a little bit. So what can you tell us a little bit about like when and how do we dream?
Well, our most vivid dreams probably take place during REM.
Hmm.
And if you awaken someone right at the REM cycle, I believe it's something like 75 to 80% of the time the person will be able to report a dream. So if you've got someone in a sleep lab, you've got them hooked up to, one of those, whatever they're called. I would pick the wrong thing if I made it up. And you see that they've exited REM, and you wake them up, they'll be like, "Oh, I was just dreaming about."
Hmm.
We do also dream during other phases of sleep. It's apparently the more vivid ones usually occur during REM. And if you deprive someone of REM sleep, they will eventually become psychotic,
Mm.
which, kind of makes you think, well, is sleep somehow protective of our mental health? I know that the scientists believe that dreams are important for kind of encoding long-term memories, and they're important, therefore, in learning. But no, I don't think science has exactly got their finger on the pulse of this. And of course, uh, Jung's understanding of dreams is almost a little bit more spiritual,
Hmm.
if you will. That there's some higher intelligence in us that we've kind of called the dream maker,
Hmm.
that is going to share insights with you and guide you on your path to your unfolding. Well, the scientists don't talk about that, and
Right.
yet, I see that every day in my work.
Yeah,
So,
I'm sure. Same. I feel like science, while very necessary, sometimes can offer very limited.
mhm.
I think that going back to a spiritual, almost just unpacking of the dream, I think is no one can really tell you what something means to you or your symbols or
That's
your
right.
relationship to your day to day. A
That's
little
right.
bit unrelated, but like when I work with clients in health and wellness, I always try to tell people like you are your own best doctor. Like you can go and work with somebody and tell all of your friends about this thing that you're experiencing, but you in your heart know why you might have
Mm-hmm.
had that dream or what part of you it's signaling for you to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then you already mentioned this, but in the book, in Dreamwise, you said that dreams draw our attention to what we have forgotten, discarded, or left undeveloped. That
Mm-hmm.
dreams are the door through which the unknown and often exiled or banished parts of us find their way
Mm-hmm.
to consciousness. That is so deep and heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a little bit more why we should work with our dreams?
Well, I think that dreams help us even if we don't remember them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the process of remembering your dreams, recording them, writing them down, and hopefully even working with them as we've outlined in the book, kind of speeds up the process of psychological development. And they can be really comforting, because they can offer kind of surprising answers. They can give you a heads up when maybe you're kind of getting off the trail a little bit, and they can kind of say, hey, you better watch out. So I think one of the major ideas is that dreams bring up this other perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And wouldn't you want to have access to that? I mean, it's
Yeah.
different than the conscious perspective. And some of it might be, maybe not that helpful, but a lot of it's quite helpful. And wouldn't you just want to know that?
Yeah, and
Like,
I think it's even more empowering that it's coming from something from within,
exactly.
as opposed to like someone outside of you telling
Yeah.
you anything about yourself or hey, I think you might have, got off your path a little bit. I think you need to kind of bring it back. I would trust my own inner voice,
Right.
trust the voice of my dream maker and the images that it's showing me every night when I go to bed. I would trust that insight, I think, a little bit more than anything else. So what would some of the practices be then if like somebody is having a hard time recalling their dreams or maybe bits and pieces on how to build more of that relationship with the dream maker? You touch on it in the book on some
Yeah.
practices, but if you want to share
Yeah.
some of your tried and true.
hmm Well, one of the things that I think can be helpful is to write a letter to your dream maker. Just
Yeah.
write a letter and say, I appreciate you. I'm listening. I want to hear what you have to say. If you send me a dream, I promise I'll write it down. And then, of course, you have to follow through.
Yeah.
So one of the first, most important things is get a dream journal. And maybe that's an app on your phone. Maybe it's, a beautiful, I have a nice leather journal that I use with
Gorgeous.
refillable paper. It's very specific what I want because I want to be able to open the fold. So it's a kind of disc bound book. So, and I can put
Nice.
in more paper. So, but you have to find out what kind of works for you
Yeah.
and make it kind of, do it with intention to create something special because you're really creating a ritual for yourself. And what you want to try to do is write something down in that book every morning, even if it's just no dream recalled. But
Mm.
even if you just remember a little snippet, write it down.
Mhm.
The more you write down your dreams, it's likely that you'll remember more dreams,
It's
especially
like
if it just becomes a habit,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, you're like flexing that muscle, that part of your brain, right? If you're even writing down just a sentence, a small recollection,
Yeah.
it helps to create that muscle over time, right?
Well, and I also think that you're signaling to the dream maker, I really want to hear what you have to say and I really
Mm.
value it. It's sort of like if you had a really beautiful stray cat that was sometimes hanging around, you
Mhm.
might be like, wow, look at that cat. That cat is so beautiful. But if you start feeding the cat's going to keep coming.
Yeah.
And writing down your dreams is almost like feeding the cat. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, let's do this. Let's have a relationship.
And then
And
something else that you guys mentioned in the book that I loved was that you need to become fluid and flexible and get comfortable with being uncomfortable when it comes to dream work.
yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about what that means?
Well, because dreams are, told in the language of image, symbol, and metaphor,
Hmm.
they can be really hard to understand. And I'll tell you something. I work with dreams every day. So I'm a therapist who specializes in Jung.
Hmm.
And so a lot of the people that come to see me, they're coming for problems like, depression, anxiety, job woes, relationship issues, the same thing people go to therapists for generally. But part of the deal is we work with dreams.
Yeah.
So I'm used to hearing lots and lots of dreams. I hear dreams every single day. And, at this point, I think I'm, pretty competent at it. But when I wake up with my own dreams, I'm often like, I have no idea what this means. It's very difficult because, like you were saying, it's kind of made for you, but it's bringing in that other perspective that is distant from consciousness.
Hmm.
So my conscious brain is, it's pretty powerful, and it just like knows what it knows. And then here comes this other voice saying, "Did you think about it this way?" And it's like, it's very hard to wrap your head around that because it's so different. So, what we really wanted to do with DreamWise was to give people the tools to work with your own dreams, to make it easier. It's still hard to slip outside of that conscious perspective and be able to maybe hear the voice of the dream maker.
Hmm.
So I think, you write the dreams down, and then hopefully you ask yourself some of the questions that we've offered in the book to prompt you to kind of pop you out of that conscious attitude so that you can open yourself up to the dream maker's wisdom.
Yeah. You also mentioned in the book the importance of writing about the dream in the present tense.
Hmm.
Why is that? Because, go ahead.
Yeah. Well,
I
I
have
just,
some thoughts about that.
okay. Well, what are your thoughts?
Well, I just feel like, in particular, when I have uncomfortable dreams, it can be hard because I believe very strongly in the power of the spoken word. I believe that our languages, the words that we choose to speak, where our thoughts go, we're lending power to that.
Hmm.
So when I'm recalling an uncomfortable dream, which of course going back to the idea of like being comfortable with being
Yeah.
uncomfortable,
Yeah.
it's hard. I this was a practice that I just did intuitively a couple years ago where I started always writing down my dreams. If there was something weighing on my mind, I would go to bed and I would just speak to whatever part of myself to be
Hmm.
like, "Hey, I need clarity here."
Yeah. Hmm.
When At first I would feel like I was speaking to my mother's spirit when I would go to bed because I would just always look to her for guidance. And then I realized that I was more so asking my higher self.
Hmm.
And then if I would have the dream, which fortunately enough I would receive clarity
Hmm.
about whatever situation I was asking about. It was uncomfortable for me to write it down in the present moment that it was happening now to me
Hmm.
because I feel like it would keep me in the vibration of that experience that I
Hmm.
wasn't really sure I wanted to stay in.
Yeah, and I think that is sort of in essence kind of why we recommend that, which is pretty
Yeah.
common, by the
Yeah.
way. But it's like you want the dream to feel as immediate as possible, as
Mm-hmm.
fresh as possible emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
because that's when you're going. Sometimes you get a dream and it just desiccates, it just like dries out like a leaf in autumn. So I'll have people come in and they'll bring their dream journal in, and and this has happened to me too. It's like you're reading the dream and they'll say, "I have no memory of having this dream. I wrote it down,
Mm.
but I don't remember it." And I prefer not to work with those dreams in therapy because, there's no emotional charge there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
sometimes if people say, "Oh, I have 10 dreams this week. Which one should I talk about?" And I'll usually say, "Well, which one has the most emotional juice?"
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're looking for that in dreams. And dreams do often provoke feelings
Mm-hmm.
in a variety of tones and timbres and intensities. And we want to kind of preserve that as much as possible when we create this artifact of the dream text.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. How much well, I know that the book Dreamwise in a lot of ways can act as a dream dictionary of itself because you guys do offer information on symbolisms and you have the keys written out in terms of just encouraging people to look a little bit deeper in what their dreams could be telling them. But how often should we, if we have a dream and after we write it down, are we to just work through that on our own, or should we like Google certain things? Like what's like the best
Yeah.
recommendation? Because I know for me, like I will get caught and like I dreamt of a white buffalo. What does that mean?
Yeah,
Something
yeah,
along those
yeah,
lines.
yeah. Well, so I'm not a fan of dream dictionaries, which literally have like a list of images that might show up in a dream and then what they
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
Because the images in dreams are so personal. So if you dream of, the first car that you owned in high school, and then, that's a very particular thing. It happened at a certain time. It has certain associations and memories attached to it, versus just a car. And if you look up in a dream dictionary, the dream dictionary will say a car means this, and it doesn't begin to capture the complexity and the individuality of what that particular dream image means to you.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying I don't use them. I'm not a fan. I've had people come in and say, well, I dreamt about this octopus, so I looked up octopus and it said this. And, it's like, okay, well, maybe that was helpful. In some ways it's a little bit like of a Rorschach test, it gives you something to think about. I mean, I'm like kind of, I have very complicated feelings about AI dream interpretation.
Oh, yeah.
I've certainly dabbled with it myself, and a lot of my analysans have as well. And I think sometimes it can kind of really get you started.
Mm.
But again, the AI doesn't know you. It doesn't know your life story. It doesn't know how you feel about your sister who was born when you were 3. It doesn't know about what happened at the office last week.
Mhm.
And dreams always comment on our life. So I'll have people that want to come in sometimes and just talk about their dreams.
Mhm.
And I'm always like, you gotta tell me what's going on,
Under the
with your
surface.
roommate
Yeah. Yeah.
or your job, or what's going on with your bank account, because the dreams are not just happening up here in some sort of cosmic realm. They're commenting on your life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important, and that's where the rubber meets the road. Is what is the dream telling you about your life that you need to pay attention to or shift how you're thinking about it? The AI can't do that.
Yeah.
So really, there's no substitute for working on your own dreams from a psychological standpoint. And it's great to work on dreams either in a dream group, or maybe with an analyst if that's in your budget.
Mm-hmm.
But short of that, working, Jung said that the point of analysis was to get the patient to the point where he or she could work on his own dreams.
Mm.
And then you don't need the analyst anymore.
Mhm.
That's what Jung said. So with DreamWise, we really wanted to try to give people the tools to do it themselves. And so in the book, there are 69 keys, we call them, and they're basically little prompts that you can apply to your dreams that will just help you kind of, I think about like a sculpture, right? If you look at a sculpture, you walk around it and you see it from all the different perspectives. That's a great thing about sculpture as opposed to painting, because
Mhm.
it looks like one thing over here. I'm in Philadelphia where we have the Rodin Museum. So, and it's like, it looks like this from here. And if you walk over here, it looks like that. And dreams are like that. You have to kind of walk around them. You have to circumambulate them, big fancy word. And the keys in DreamWise help you to do just that.
Yeah.
And usually what I find is when I use the keys, and I do because they're really helpful,
Yeah.
usually it takes me like 4 to 5 keys and I start going, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe it takes me fewer because I'm pretty used to this, but maybe 10,
Yeah.
so just little journaling prompts that you can answer in a few sentences,
Mm-hmm.
and it can help you come to
Yeah.
understand your dream.
I mean, even when I had that first connecting call with you, and it was, just, I don't know, days fresh off of this dream that I had that I swear stayed with me for much longer than I mean, it's still, if I think about it, and, when you recall a dream and you see almost just the flickering of the imagery from that, experience, it's still like stayed with me. But you had asked me a question about a supporting role that a character in the dream had played on
Uh-huh.
on like what I knew about the person, which is not much. And then you brought it back to me. Like you had asked how this person, I forgot if you asked me like if it was how she was different than me,
Hmm.
or what
Yeah.
part of me. It was just interesting because I might have would I maybe would have gotten to that question on my
Hmm.
own, but just
Hmm.
having you reflect it as opposed to any other circumstance in the dream, you brought it back to myself, which I appreciated because it allowed for me to meditate on that
Hmm.
question, like that you had asked me, and just the way that I even felt in my body. I almost felt like a sigh of relief as
Mm.
opposed to this heaviness that I was walking around, feeling like my judgment had been clouded or I was back in a situation that I worked so hard to get out of. Like it was really interesting. So I have a couple of questions on stemming from that. How would you approach a dream that would be like almost a nightmare or something
Hmm.
scary? Like, how
Hmm.
would you recommend people to approach a dream like that?
Well, so nightmares are pretty common, obviously. They're just, what is a nightmare? A nightmare is any dream that in which we're very, very, very afraid.
Hmm.
And I think of nightmares as, and we do have a section about nightmares in the book. Nightmares are really just the dream maker is trying to get your attention. Maybe you've been having gentler dreams, but you've been ignoring them, and you've been taking a certain path in life, and you're not paying attention. The dream maker's trying to get your attention.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like highlighter, or the effects thing that you can put on texts, or bold effect or whatever. That's like what a nightmare is.
Hmm.
So I think it's important to remember that all dreams come in the interest of healing and wholeness, even nightmares.
Hmm.
So the nightmare's there to teach you something or provide you some information that the dream maker thinks you really, really need.
Mm.
And it's also, what comes to mind is one of our important keys is that the least trustworthy attitude in the dream is usually that of the dream ego, which
Mm.
is not our idea, by the way. It's we're kind of quoting some work, some previous Jungians, but it's a really important
Beautiful, though.
idea.
Yeah.
So that if you were, for example, well, I'll tell you a little story. So I was working with someone who'd had a dream, a frightening dream. Maybe it was a nightmare
Hmm.
where she was, in some kind of urban setting at night, and she's being followed,
Hmm.
and she's terrified. It's an empty train platform, and there's someone behind her, and she can hear his footsteps getting closer and closer and closer. So we worked with the dream for a little while, and then I said, "Can you see if you can kind of imagine the dream from his perspective?" So she
Mm.
did, and she went, "Oh my God, he's following me because he has something to tell me. He's trying to help me."
Mm.
So, a lot of times, what we're afraid of in dreams is something that we've disallowed in our personal life. Like we've decided that, for example, we shouldn't be ambitious because that's, I don't know, that's not, we don't see ourselves as an ambitious person. We don't like ambitious people. We're not, ambition is bad. And we don't even consciously know that we think that. It's not like we go around saying, yeah, ambition is terrible, but it's kind of an idea that's taken root.
Hmm.
And maybe that's not good for us because maybe we have some things that we really need to do in the world and we need a little bit of ambition to do it.
Yeah.
So then we might have a nightmare of like a guy in a really nice Armani suit who's in the room and we think he's going to kill us,
Hmm.
and we're like, oh my God, this guy is trying to kill me. But if you think, wait a minute, what if the attitude of my dream ego, the I in the dream, what if I'm wrong? What if he's not trying to kill me?
Mm.
What if he's there for a different reason? Maybe he's there. Maybe we think he's bad because we've sort of decided that ambition's not good.
Hmm.
Um, but maybe he's there because we need him. We need to incorporate some of that. So I guess I would encourage, and I know some people suffer terribly from nightmares, but in general, I'd say don't assume that the thing that's trying to hurt you in the dream is necessarily bad. Maybe it's just something that's difficult for you to integrate for some reason, but the dream is a real invitation to do so.
Love that. I feel like that lends to your earlier point that you had made that our dreams are here for a deeper purpose of healing and
Hmm.
comfort. So
Hmm.
I think if we can, even if somebody's first instinct in their waking life is to be like, this man in an Armani suit wants to kill me, why would I think that? Like,
Right.
what about me feels threatened by the image of a man in a suit in a room with, I think
Right.
that's interesting because then it just makes you present to yourself in sometimes ways that are,
Hmm.
I mean, I always like to remain being a student of this human
Hmm.
experience,
Hmm.
like I know nothing and I know everything at the same time kind of thing. So
Hmm.
it's always just so interesting when you take a deeper look within and you're like, what part of my brain would think that I'm unsafe in a situation like
Hmm.
that?
Hmm.
Or yeah, it was beautiful too, that conversation that I'd had where you almost gave me back my power
Hmm.
in the
Hmm.
dream scenario, and it did really help me lighten the load of that dream. So I want to my next question for you, in your experience, how often are dreams, or can dreams be prophetic or like premonitions?
Hmm. Well, dreams often may give us an intimation about something that's coming down the pike. And Jung referred to this as the prospective function of dreams. And it's not that dreams are actually precognitive in this sense.
Mhm.
It's that, the unconscious is just taking in all of the information, a lot of information that bypasses consciousness. So, in some sense, the unconscious has access to just an unbelievable amount of data, more than your conscious mind.
Mhm.
And it's detecting patterns, and it can kind of tell you, if you keep doing that, you could have this problem.
Mhm.
So Jung said, and I love this metaphor, that dreams are no more kind of prophetic in that sense than like the weathermen are prophetic, because the weather forecaster looks at, oh, here's a high pressure system and a low pressure system, and the wind is blowing this way, and so it's probably going to rain next week or whatever. And I think that's what the unconscious does a lot of times with our dreams. So there's kind of I don't know that it's silly, but there's a small example in the book where I was supposed to go to an important appointment. It
Mhm.
was actually my dream exam in analytic training, and I was like, okay, yeah, the dream exam's at 3, and so I'm going to wake up at this time, and then I'm going to do yoga, and then maybe I'll go for a run, and then I'm going to sit down and study more, and then maybe I'm going to meditate or whatever. And I had like my whole day mapped out until the dream exam, like trying to prepare for it. And I had this dream the night before that there was like a discount children's shoe sale, and I got there too late, and all the good shoes were gone. It was just a mess. And I was like, when you have that dream like the night before your dream exam and analytic training, you go, okay, what does that dream mean?
Yeah, like, whoa, what?
So I,
All
even though it
day.
was sort of like, what? So I
Yeah.
really sat down and I was thinking about it, and I was like, what does that dream mean? I was like, I arrived too late.
Mm.
Let me check the schedule one more time. Well, the dream exam was actually at 1 p.m., not 3 p.m.
Oh,
So I was like, oh, thank you, Dream Maker.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the same time, it was so funny because the Dream Maker was like this exam, like to me, the exam was everything because it kind of determined whether I got to move forward in training. But the unconscious was like, it's really not that big a deal. It's kind of just like a children's shoe sale. Like, don't get your panties in such a twist, relax.
I was
But
gonna say,
you
like,
might as well show up on time,
yeah,
so.
yeah. Even just the symbolism of it being like a children's sale, like would almost be like your inner child wants to come through a little bit. Maybe we just
Yeah,
need to add a little bit more play to our
yeah,
schedule. That's how
yeah,
I would kind of take
yeah.
that. What are your thoughts on reoccurring dreams?
Well, again, I think we have recurring dreams when we haven't gotten the message yet. And
Mm,
so the unconscious just keeps on feeding us again and again. A lot of times, though, what I will say is sometimes people bring in a dream, they're like, I have a recurring dream of X. And
mhm,
I'm like, I don't want to hear the general theme. I want you to tell me the last time it happened. The
mhm,
specifics really matter. If you have dreams that you're in the airport and you can't find your passport and you don't know where your luggage is, it really matters. Is it exactly the same as last time, or this time did you leave the airport to go back home to try to get your passport and you couldn't make it back in time?
mhm,
Or last time you were going to, Acapulco, and this time you're on your way to Russia. I mean, note the differences, because a lot of times you can see kind of a progression. You can see actual evidence of psychological growth as these themes recur.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of get interested about like the unconscious starts using these images and scenarios almost as a kind of shorthand, you know. It's like, well, there's that motif again. I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to get on an airplane and I don't have my passport. And you know, I think in some sense when it just shows up and shows up and shows up, like there's something we haven't understood. But then sometimes eventually when we do understand it, the unconscious sort of starts using it as part of a language. It's like, oh yeah, that scenario, that familiar scenario, you know, where I'm having trouble moving forward in life, you know, and I can't kind of hold on to my own sense of identity in these new situations or something like
Mm-hmm.
whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, I've had reoccurring dreams a handful of times, and sometimes when you wake up from them, you just almost feel exhausted, and you're like, oh God, not that
Hmm.
again.
Hmm.
um, might be like a minute detail, but do you think that it's more important and beneficial to develop the relationship with the dream maker and by writing out in your dream journal or typing? Like, do you think that there's a difference between
Yeah.
the both?
That's a really good question. I've tried both,
Hmm.
and I am now a fan of writing on paper.
Hmm.
I think that there is something, I mean, first of all, the thing about typing is that you're going to have to open a device.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's, I mean, if it's God forbid your phone, I don't know about you, but the second I pick that puppy up, you know, it's like, oh, I got a text from who, and I got a
Yeah.
WhatsApp from,
And you're
you know,
totally taken out
yeah.
of your experience.
Yeah, and
100%.
and if it's a computer, you know, you've got to like turn it on, and it takes a little while to boot up, and then you know you see the welcome screen, and then it tells you how the stocks are doing, and so I think it's very I think I think there's something about just I have a like I said I have a paper journal, and then I have this pen that has a little red light on it so that you can I think it's called like the pilot pen or something so that I can write in the dark too. And I don't even have to turn on the light, so I can kind of stay in that in between
Yeah.
state.
Yeah.
And then I do like to be able to text search my dreams. So there's a really great app called Elsewhere that it offers AI interpretation, but I don't use it for that. But it has a great scanner.
Mm,
So I write my dreams by hand and then I scan them into the app. So if I want to see like, okay, when else have I dreamt about, uh, you know, I don't know, an apple tree?
mhm,
I can just go back and say, oh yeah, 40 years ago, I also dreamed about an apple tree. So,
mm. Interesting. Okay, cool. I like that. Yeah, I agree. I think that I mean, sometimes it is just easy if the phone is right there, boom, you just type it in your notes app. But I do think that it's important to write down with keeping the theme with being intentional about what
hmm
it is that you
yeah.
are doing and working through.
Hmm.
Um, you touched on in Dreamwise a little bit, like taking note of the environment, and we spoke a little bit about this earlier. Would there be any trying to think like there was this time where I would have dreams where I would be sitting down and I would refer to them as interview style dreams, where
Hmm.
all of these different people in my life, this was happening. I was living in LA for 2 months. I was there on a project, and almost like without fail, every night it would switch between like three or four different people. And we would be sitting on a couch and environment undisclosed, but we would be sitting down and it would be like these interview style questions. And I would be asking these people these questions and
Hmm.
they would respond. Is there anything that you can share about like if it's that kind of like dynamic in a dream where it feels transactional versus when it feels more like imaginative and when it's like oh all of a sudden we were in the basement and then the wall broke through and then we were in a lake, like is there a difference that you can almost share in terms of the symbolism of like the two different scenarios?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I mean, not that exact configuration, but these dreams are almost like, I think of them as like kind of thought dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they are a little bit drier. They're a little bit harder to interpret. They're usually a little bit less imaginative. They may have a lot less emotion.
Mhm.
I still think they're symbolic and there can be good stuff in them.
Yeah.
So, but you know, I mean, the other thing is that what I tend to do is try to write my dreams down for the week. And I mean, if I do happen to have time when I wake up in the morning to work on the dream, I will.
Hmm.
But otherwise, I'll sort of set it aside, and then on the weekend, it's like, okay, I'm going to pick one dream and I'm going to work on it, and I'm more likely to work on a dream that has like, you know, um, striking imagery and big emotions, So
Yeah. So even if we don't recall a dream when we wake up in the morning, we should still write in our dream journals, no dream recalled, just to keep.
to kind of prime the pump, yeah.
Okay. All right. And any other practices aside from writing a letter to our dream makers and jotting down our dreams? If we wake up in the middle of the night and we recall the dream, even if it's like 2 a.m., do you still recommend that we like write it right then and there?
Well, I mean, you have to weigh that against, how early do you have to wake up and what's your day like the next day. I mean, I think maybe the best thing to do, and this is why I love my pen with the red light,
Yeah.
is I can just, you write down 2 words. You don't
Hmm.
have to write the whole thing down, but you just write, spotted snake. And in the morning you'll be like, oh yeah, there was the spotted snake and I was in this, it all come back to you.
Hmm.
Usually if you just get a couple words
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
So that can be a good idea
That's
too.
also interesting when that happens too, right? Because, like, if you don't recall the dream when you first wake up, but then later in the day,
Hmm.
you'll be doing something that's so mindless, whether it's just like hitting the elevator button and getting into the elevator, you're like, oh, like I had this whole,
Hmm.
experience downloads from your subconscious mind that you're like, whoa, teleported to that experience. So then, yeah, maybe you should keep your dream journals with you. Like,
Yeah, I don't do that, but what I will do is obviously, we all have our phones with us all the time. And
yeah.
if I do just out and about on my day, it's like, oh yeah, I'll just write it down a couple words in like the notes app on my phone, and then I'll write it down before I go to sleep,
Hmm. Hmm.
which it can be good too, because that almost like primes you to have the next dream if you do it right before you go to sleep. So.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Last thing, what are your thoughts on lucid dreaming?
A lot of people are very interested in lucid dreaming, and I know that for some people it happens naturally. A lot of people want to cultivate it. I'm a little skeptical of people who really, it's like that's their main thing. They want to lucid dream because I'm interested in hearing what the unconscious has to say. I'm not so
Yeah.
interested in, directing it. I mean, my conscious mind works hard enough when I'm awake.
Mhm.
I know that, in Tibetan Buddhism, it's called dream yoga, actually. And there's a long tradition of lucid dreaming that is put to spiritual purposes. And I've heard of people kind of coming up with something similar, actually, just spontaneously in a Western context. And so I don't think that all lucid dreaming is bad. I'm not that interested in it personally.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. I feel like I'm with you. I'm much more interested in what my subconscious mind has to say versus trying to control the
Right.
experience. I'm already doing the most during the day.
I
Like
know. I control
nighttime,
enough.
yeah, like the nighttime is like, all right, what do you have to tell me now? Like
Right.
what's next that we need to work through?
Right. You want to be
Um,
receptive.
all right, awesome. Well, where can people follow you? How can people work with you, learn more about you? Feel
Yeah,
free. Give us all of the
sure.
juice.
So my website is lisamarchiano.com. And in addition to my psychotherapy practice, I also have an online women's group on fairy tales called spinningstraw.com. And I run retreats for women. We're having a retreat in Tuscany in August that
Oh,
only has 2 spots
beautiful.
left.
Great.
We're going to do dream incubation, dream healing, and work on fairy tales, in addition to doing some really amazing outings and lots of yoga. And my podcast is thisjungianlife.com.
Mhm.
You can listen wherever you get your podcasts. And if you head over there too, you can find out about Dream School, our 12-month online program that teaches you how to work with your dreams. And you can also find out about our books and lots of other good stuff.
Yes, definitely pick up your copy of Dreamwise. I loved it. Lisa, thank you so much for sharing all of your beautiful insight and wisdom
Thank
with
you.
us today on the beautiful dreamscape world.
It
Um,
is a
really,
beautiful thing.
yeah, it really is. I will take the I mean, so much from this conversation I will take with me, but I really loved, offering the comforting perspective of our dreams and looking to them as healing and growth. So I really appreciate your time and your energy today. As always, if you loved this chat, you can share it with a friend, leave us a review. Don't forget to follow to miss an episode. Thank you again so much, and we'll see you next week on Juice is the New Tea.
Okay, thank you.
Juice is the New Tea is brought to you by Cleanse Juices. For more information on 3-day juice cleanses and 4 flavor packs, visit iamcleanse.com. Use code JUICEISTheNewT for 10% off all orders.